In the high-stakes theater of global power, silence is rarely a sign of peace. It is the sound of a pivot. On February 2, 2026, the world's largest democracy, a nuclear-armed titan of 1.4 billion people, did something its critics said it would never do. It blinked. For 2 years, India had performed a geopolitical tightrope walk that baffled the West. It bought Russian oil by the millions of barrels, effectively bankrolling the Kremlin's war machine, while simultaneously being courted as the indispensable partner of the United States. But then came the phone call. One conversation between Donald Trump and Narendra Modi, one ultimatum, and suddenly the defiance that defined New Delhi's foreign policy for a decade vanished. The reports were jarring. India had reportedly folded. The flow of Russian crude, the lifeblood of the Indo-Russian special and privileged strategic partnership, was being throttled. How did a nation that survived the Cold War's pressures and ignored the G7's price caps succumb to a single administration's demands? This isn't just a story about oil. This is the reveal of an undefeated pattern, a new era of economic total war where neutrality is no longer a luxury you can buy. Look closely, and you'll see the casualties. Canada tried to resist the new trade logic. It folded. Denmark attempted a sovereign pivot. It bowed. The European Union, once the bastion of regulatory independence, has been forced into a strategic hedge. Today, we go behind the curtain of the most significant geopolitical shift of the decade. We will break down the economic nuclear option that left India with no choice, the secret mother of all deals that forced Trump's hand, and why the secret surrender in New Delhi might be the master key to ending the war in Ukraine. Stick around until the end, because the pattern doesn't stop with India. There is one final target left on the map, and they are the only ones big enough to fight back.
To understand the fold, you have to understand the defiance. In 2022, when the world turned its back on Moscow, India saw an opportunity. While the West imposed sanctions, New Delhi opened its coffers. At its peak, Russia was supplying nearly 40% of India's total crude imports. We're talking 1.8 million barrels a day. That's a $70 billion annual lifeline for a war machine. For India, it was simple Atmanirbhar logic, strategic autonomy. Cheap energy meant low inflation. Low inflation meant a stable middle class. Prime Minister Modi was heralded at home as the leader who put India first, refusing to be bullied by Western hypocrisy. Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, Jai Shankar famously quipped. It was the anthem of a new multipolar world. India wasn't choosing a side, it was choosing itself. But there's a problem with playing both sides. Eventually, the middle ground disappears. Enter the 47th President of the United States. Donald Trump didn't come back to the White House to play the traditional game of diplomatic concerns and joint communiques. He came back with a hammer. In August 2025, the hammer dropped. The U.S. imposed a baseline 25% reciprocal tariff on Indian goods. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was a specific, punitive 25% penalty tariff explicitly linked to India's purchase of Russian oil. The math was brutal, a combined 50% tariff on Indian exports. For the small and medium enterprises in India, the backbone of Modi's political base, this was an extinction-level event. Textiles, gems, leather, and jewelry. These aren't just line items, they are millions of votes. The U.S. is India's largest export market. If you lose the American consumer, the Indian century stalls before it even begins. This wasn't a trade war, it was a siege. Trump wasn't asking India to stop buying Russian oil. He was making it mathematically impossible for them to keep doing it and survive. But New Delhi is a master of the countermove. Sensing the walls closing in from Washington, India accelerated a deal that had been stuck in purgatory for 20 years, the India-EU Free Trade Agreement. Dubbed the mother of all deals, this pact was designed to give India a massive escape hatch. If the U.S. market was going to be gated by 50% tariffs, India would pivot its 1.4 billion consumers toward Europe, and vice versa. However, this move had an unintended consequence. It forced Trump's hand. He realized that if India fully integrated with the EU's regulatory orbit, the U.S. would lose its leverage over the world's fastest-growing economy forever. The pressure didn't ease, it intensified. Trump saw the EU deal not as a threat, but as a deadline. He needed to break the Russia-India link before the EU deal could provide India with the strategic autonomy it so desperately craved. On February 2, 2026, the silence broke. Trump took to Truth Social. The announcement was classic Trumpian theater. He claimed Modi had agreed to stop buying Russian oil entirely and pivot to U.S. and Venezuelan crude. In exchange, the 50% tariff would be slashed to 18%. But look at the response from New Delhi. It's a masterclass in public victory, private fold. Modi spoke of reduced tariffs and friendship. He celebrated the win for Indian exporters. But on the specific commitment to dump Putin, total silence. Analysts call this the face-saving pivot. By not acknowledging the oil concession publicly, Modi keeps his image as a sovereign strongman intact for his domestic audience. But the data tells a different story. In the weeks leading up to the deal, Russian oil imports to India hit a 3-year low. The fold was real. It just wasn't televised.
Now we get to the why. Why did Trump care so much about Indian refineries? It's the master key. Trump has repeatedly promised to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. To do that, he doesn't need more tanks in Kyiv. He needs less money in Moscow. Russia's economy has become a one-trick pony, and India was the primary rider. By forcing India to buy American, a $500 billion commitment mentioned in the deal, Trump effectively drains the Kremlin's most reliable pool of liquidity. Without the Indian sink for Russian crude, Putin is forced to the negotiating table. India didn't just trade oil for tariffs. They unintentionally, or perhaps very intentionally, became the lever Trump will use to flip the script on the European war. What we witnessed this week was the end of an era, the era of the swing state. For 30 years, the globalized world allowed middle powers to play the field. You could buy your weapons from Moscow, your chips from Taiwan, and your sneakers from the US. You could be aligned with everyone and beholden to no one. That world is dead. The American economic orbit is expanding, and its gravity is becoming inescapable. If a nation as powerful, as proud, and as populous as India cannot maintain its neutrality under the weight of the 50% tariff, who can? The pattern is complete. Canada, Denmark, the EU, India. The message from Washington is clear. You are either a customer of the American system or you are a casualty of it. The trade war is no longer about balancing books, it's about choosing a future. India has made its choice. The question is, can China afford to make theirs? If you want to see the deep dive into how China is preparing for the final tariff war, click the video on your screen right now, and don't forget to subscribe to stay ahead of the pattern.